Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a fascinating and honestly a heavily debated topic, the world of afterlife science. We're going to be unpacking the clinical data and the massive amount of exhaustive research gathered by the Forever Family Foundation. They're an organization entirely dedicated to looking at the scientific evidence suggesting that, hey, we just might be a whole lot more than our physical bodies. So think about this for a second. What if your mind actually outlives your brain? It's a question that completely upends our most basic foundational assumptions about life, about deaths, and about what it really means to be conscious. If your thoughts, your quirks, your personality, and your memories aren't just biological byproducts of your brain chemistry, well, how does that change the entire way we look at our own existence? Now, mainstream science usually operates on one really big core assumption, right? That consciousness is purely a byproduct of the physical brain. The idea is that when the brain dies, the mind is just extinguished, lights out. But afterlife science proposes a totally radical alternative. What if the mind can actually extend beyond the physical body and survive physical death? And to be clear, we aren't talking about blind religious faith here. This is a strictly evidence-based pursuit. Researchers are investigating actual phenomena that indicate the mind can operate completely independently of the brain, which lays the groundwork for the survival of consciousness after physical death. So here is our roadmap for how we're going to investigate this. We'll be covering, number 1, near-death experiences. Number 2, the science of mediumship. Number 3, technology and the spirit. Number 4, memories of past lives. And finally, number 5, the final frontier. Let's get into it. Section 1, near-death experiences. Let's dive right into our first major pillar. Reports of near-death experiences, or NDEs, have absolutely skyrocketed lately, mostly thanks to modern cardiac resuscitation techniques bringing more people back. And while every single experience is highly personal and unique, credentialed medical researchers like Dr. Bruce Grayson have found a staggering amount of consistency across thousands of clinically dead patients. We're talking about people vividly describing detaching from their bodies, moving through a tunnel toward a bright light, and even encountering deceased relatives. But you want to know the most unexplainable hallmark of all? It's the unusually clear, lucid thinking and the incredibly detailed life reviews. I mean, from a strict biological standpoint, that kind of vivid brain activity simply shouldn't be possible with a non-working physical brain. And that brings us to the real kicker, the veridical nature of these experiences. A veridical NDE is a case where a patient is clinically flatlined, totally dead, yet they come back with highly specific information about things happening in another room or even another building. They bring back details that researchers later check and find to be 100% accurate. Experiencing clear, externally verifiable events shouldn't be physically possible when you're clinically dead, yet the data shows us it happens over and over again. Section 2, the science of mediumship. So, if near-death experiences happen right at the edge of life, what happens when researchers actually try to communicate across that boundary? Well, studying mediums, people who purportedly communicate with the deceased, isn't just some trendy new thing. It's actually a continuous line of research that goes all the way back to the late 1800s. We're talking about eminent, highly respected scientists like William James and Sir William Crookes using the experimental protocols of their day. Fast forward to right now, and modern scientists are replicating these communication studies. But today, they're utilizing incredibly strict double-blind protocols and rigorous statistical analysis. In fact, according to the data gathered by the Forever Family Foundation, these modern, highly controlled studies are providing statistically scorable evidence that strongly supports the survival hypothesis. And why is that a big deal? Because it takes the study of mediumship completely out of the spooky paranormal parlor room and places it squarely into the clinical laboratory. Section 3, technology and the spirit. All right, building off of human mediums, let's step into the realm of actual hardware. This is known as instrumental transcommunication. A major chunk of this is electronic voice phenomena, which you've probably heard called EVP. This is a process where discarnate entities purportedly imprint voices directly onto recording devices. But here's the key detail. These voices are not heard live in the room while the recording is happening. They only show up later when the audio is played back. Researchers point out that these voices and images frequently appear over white noise backgrounds or on non-broadcasting TV stations, which provides tangible physical recordings that can be rigorously scientifically analyzed. Naturally, as you could imagine, this invites some pretty heavy debate. Skeptics will quickly argue that this is just pareidolia, That's the phenomenon where our brains naturally try to find coherent patterns and meaning hidden in random static, like seeing shapes in clouds. But researchers fire back at that argument with what they call Class A EVPs. These are voices that are so incredibly clear that when a whole group of people sits down to listen, they all independently hear the exact same message, no prompting needed. Furthermore, some of these EVPs directly respond to specific questions asked by the experimenters in real time. Researchers argue that interactive elements severely challenges the whole "it's just random noise" explanation. Section 4. Memories of Past Lives. Now we're turning to a phenomenon that we usually associate with Eastern philosophy, but one that has actually undergone extensive, incredibly rigorous scientific study in the West. Reincarnation. 3,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. That astonishing number represents the volume of children's past life memory cases that have been painstakingly investigated across the globe over the span of 40 years. This massive, decades-long undertaking was spearheaded by Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia, and the sheer volume of his documented cases is just mind-blowing. But here's the thing, Dr. Stevenson wasn't out there just collecting interesting stories. He was cataloging highly unexplainable medical and psychological anomalies. Imagine a child who just naturally possesses highly specific abilities they were never taught, or a kid with severe crippling phobias that have absolutely no root environmental cause in their current life. Most incredibly of all, Stevenson meticulously documented cases where a child's physical birthmarks directly corresponded to historical medical records detailing the fatal wounds of the deceased person they recalled being. Researchers, including Dr. Jim Tucker, who continues this exact work today, emphasize that you simply cannot chalk these anomalies up to genetics or environment. Section 5. The Final Frontier. So beyond our four main pillars, there is this vast final frontier of phenomena, strongly indicating that the mind is not tethered to the skull. We're talking about deathbed visions, where dying patients have incredibly lucid, comforting conversations with unseen deceased relatives who seem to act as guides. Or dream visitations, which experiencers describe not as fuzzy, normal dreams, but as vividly real, utterly unforgettable encounters. And then there's psi phenomena. This includes things like telepathy, precognition, and remote viewing, which is the ability to send your mind to a distant target to retrieve visual details. And hey, this isn't just some fringe sci-fi theory. This exact process was utilized and funded by the CIA in the now declassified Stargate program. Whether it's a viewer in New York accurately describing a hidden target in Europe, or precognition tested in a lab, researchers argue this data clearly shows consciousness acting completely independently of the physical brain. Ultimately, whether you approach this material as a hardcore skeptic, just a curious observer, or a firm believer, you really cannot ignore the sheer volume of the data. When you stack it all up, this expansive, cumulative collection of research spanning decades of near-death experiences, mediumship, EVP recordings, and reincarnation anomalies, it demands that we take a much closer, deeply objective look at the true capabilities of the human mind. The evidence strongly suggests our consciousness is vastly more complex than just a mere biological mechanism. So I'll leave you with this. If our consciousness, our memories, and our very essence aren't just confined to the gray matter inside our skulls, where do they really live? It is a deeply provocative question, isn't it? And it's one that afterlife science researchers will undoubtedly be investigating for decades to come. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you next time.